This is Part 1 to Digital Monday. Hard Talk starts now with hosts Dennise, Demming, and Karen Nunez Tesheira. We have a very special guest on the program today, and the topic deals with domestic violence, male and female. Good afternoon, ladies.
Good afternoon.
Everyone.
Hi.
Can I just, since I didn't get a chance to go, hi, Roberta.
Yes, good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Please call me Karen.
Yes.
Did we get our guest, the order of the guest changed?
Okay, it is what it is.
Sorry, doing your housekeeping on your time, Roberta.
It's okay.
You have a little problem with your audio, Dennise.
You have a problem with my audio?
Okay, I'm hearing you clearly now.
Okay, then. Listen, You see, the internet, Trinidad, not ready for this, eh?
We have to rush show on that, but I thought we were having, I got the order of guests thing, but it's not a problem at all because actually, I know that Roberta has been a woman's rights. Actually, I read an article that you had written. It was something I was going to ask, but you hadn't written, you were responding to. So I let Dennise take that over. And are we having our second guest on? I'm asking Dennise that.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
All right. So, Roberta, I'm going to let Dennise take the lead on this.
Sure.
And then I'm going to ask something that you started to ask, which is something I was going to ask, and you had asked it, or you were bringing it up in an interview. So I'll let Dennise take it from here.
Are we on the shows yet?
Yes,
we're on.
I just wanted to know
all that bacchanal on the show.
But are we? So we are also audio and video.
Yes, we're audio. I'm seeing you and I'm hearing you, Roberta.
All right. I was just wondering how I could blur my background, but it doesn't seem possible.
No, we can see all your books in the background. Okay, there you go.
And we also streaming live on YouTube and Facebook.
Very good. Thank you very much. And hello, Dennise, and hello, Karen. Wonderful to be here with all of you. Who was singing that calypso that we just heard?
The last one?
Yes.
The last one was Baron. The title of it is What About? And before that, we had Them Advisors.
Them Advisors.
Yes.
Who's that? Who's the singer?
You see now, Dennise, you're here. You're here where you realize why she reached where she reached.
But I mean, it's kind of powerful lyrics and a lot to ponder upon.
A lot to ponder upon, but I'll let you go ahead with it, Dennise.
Yes, it's a very big song. She won the Calypso Queen competition for 2024. That is put on by the NWAC.
Yes, yes.
So it's Naomi Sinnott.
Okay.
Yes, Naomi Sinnott.
I think we had his I met her father in another situation. Now I remember.
And it's a very powerful song. When I saw what the topic was, I thought it was most appropriate for the program.
Well, you always do that. So Dennise, I'm handing it over to you.
Very much. You're hearing me now?
Yeah, we're hearing you.
Yeah, we're hearing you loud and clear.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I always appreciate the calypsos that are played based on the topic that we send, so that is absolutely wonderful. And Roberta, so happy to have you here. There's a question I ask people, which is a kind of hard question. What would you say we don't know about you?
Oh, that I'm fully a Caribbean person, completely and fully ideologically in identity and character. I very much identify with the entire region, and I consider myself from the entire region. Maybe that's not about me,
so wonderful.
But that's what I think.
Yeah. But what are you known for? Let us hear. So because the topic is domestic violence, and of course, where have we reached with it? What are the numbers showing? And of course, you made some very good points, which I will get to later on. So how did you get involved in, I know you've always been an advocate for women's rights. I know you were the head in, I know you at some point in time you were in Malaysia or somewhere like that. Mm-hmm. And then prior to that, you were in the United States. So Barbados, from which you are originally, but of course you are a product of the Caribbean. So, and yes, I taught her.
Succession.
Yeah, succession.
Yeah,
When she was having her first child.
yeah, exactly.
I, and she was one of my more brilliant students, by the way.
Yeah.
So tell the audience, because they may not know what we know about you in your field.
Well, I suppose I would say I'm someone committed to social justice. I believe we all should be committed to that. I suppose I was fortunate enough to be raised in a household where social justice was the diet, the ideological diet, and inequalities, whether it's race. Well, I was kind of in a household in the 1970s, fairly patriarchal, so concerned about race and income inequality, but not necessarily gender inequality. You know, the men on the left are not the ones most concerned about gender inequality. They kind of take that for granted. I know I'm painting a broad brush, excuse me very much. But they certainly, those men were men of their times, men in the Black Power movement for the most part. And even men on the left, men who call themselves socialists or communists. And I was in that kind of household. But what was striking to me, even as a child, was, what relationships between women and men around me, in my home, in my larger family. Um, and I was also very fortunate to be in a place where a young woman left where she was living, and she left a box of books in our house, and inside of those books were and I was like 13 or 14, The Second Sex, The Feminist Mystique, Feminine Mystique, those kinds of books, right? The Female Eunuch, kind of like the early feminist texts of the 70s. So that kind of, helped me to kind of articulate what I was feeling about inequality between men and women. And so I think that's where it starts. And then I just sort of went through my life, and I am in my life concerned about inequalities, which have, to some extent, improved in the Caribbean, but to some extent have persisted inequalities. We have quite a high level of poverty in the Caribbean, and as we know, women experience that poverty different because they carry the burden of care. So I could go on and on about that, but I think it's a mixture of nurture and sort of curiosity about the world that takes me to the work that I do, and have been privileged to
All of
do
the
as well.
work that you have done, just so that the audience know.
Well, I'm also a lawyer. I think of lawyering as a kind of active thing. A lawyer is like an active noun, and I don't actually do lawyering anymore, but I do have a legal background, so let's put it that way. But I've been engaged for the last maybe 25, 30 years in public policy, um, within the Caribbean as well as more internationally. I worked with the UN Women for quite a long time in various parts of the world.
Right. So you're definitely someone who is very much aware of issues. So we're not going to be dealing with there are a number of issues you can deal with: gender inequality, misogyny, and we could go on and on with that. But what we're trying today to kind of focus on, particularly on domestic violence, which, of course, the statistics do show that the vast majority of reported, I will have to say, reported cases of domestic violence are from women. And I was going to ask Dennise to talk a little bit about this, but one of the things that disturbed me, and you raised it actually, I just happened to have looked at it because I was saying, wait now, all the work they say they're doing, all the things, the remedies and all the prescriptions and all of that, which I would like you to, to talk about. I said, but where's the data collection to show whether this is working? How are they showing that when they have had these reports that they have come out, what has been the outcome? Has there been an improvement? The different entities that involved in gender-based issues, not only the unit in the office of the Prime Minister and the various entities that are all in a way interrelated. I don't know, even from this, yes, so, you're telling you how many, but they're not telling you what are the results of the interventions. And I find that very worrying, because what's the point of doing all of this and you can't show me the results?
Yeah. Is that for Dennise? Go ahead. Sorry.
All right. So Roberta, the question that I am interested in, and I sometimes ask these questions from the point of view of the person traveling on the maxi. When you talk about a burden of care, what are you talking about?
Well, in relation to who does this? Yeah, that's a really good question. Who cooks the food? Who cleans the house? Who takes the children to school? Who does the homework when they come home? Who is thinking about the groceries? Who's thinking about when the toilet paper is run out, where they're going to get it from? Who thinks about arranging daycare when they have to go to work? All of that, which is work that gets the family moving and gets the family to contribute to the larger society. But who is doing that? And we know largely the women are doing what we call housework, but it's unrecognized and it's undervalued, although it's the most essential work that we can have. But it's also work that creates freedom for men to do other things, and also restricts women from doing other things. Even though caring work is quite humanizing, it's better for the whole world if we all do caring work. But it is a burden. Let's face facts, right? It may be a happy burden, but it is a burden, and for some, it's not such a happy burden because it really limits the choices that they can make. But I really want to come back because, Karen, you said we can talk about misogyny, we can talk about gender equality, but we're talking about domestic violence. But in fact, the two cannot be disarticulated. They cannot be separated. They are part of a pattern. So inequality is the thing that we live with. Domestic violence is the expression of it. So when you talk about when we think about what are the formative experiences in our lives, I remember at a very young age seeing a man beat a woman in broad daylight. It must have been about 2 o'clock in the afternoon with a 2x4 piece of pine. He was beating her in her yard with a piece of wood. The neighbors were all around. She's screaming. It was so normal. I happened to see it, but it must have been something in that community that they were accustomed to seeing. And we know from the research, not only in Trinidad and Tobago but everywhere, that the highest risk behavior are for men who feel that they must control women, who think women must be submissive to them and subordinate to them. So the violence is an expression of the control, is an expression of a certain kind of masculinity. And so we keep saying, those of us who are in the feminist movement doing this work, that there's no way you can respond to domestic violence, but you cannot prevent it unless you address the underlying causes, the fundamental causes of domestic violence, which have to do with power dynamics within the household. So it's hard to separate the two things. I'm actually straight away from the question. I don't know, Dennise, you said something.
But I wanted to know if you had collected data as a result of the work that you all have done.
Yes, there's data. I mean, we're not dataless in Trinidad and Tobago. And I often think when we talk about data, sometimes we use it we say there's no data as a proxy for inaction. We may not have all the data that we want, but we have enough to tell us some things, right? And what we know is that 44% of women in intimate relationships, a survey has told us that in 2018, 44%, that's nearly one in every other woman, one in two women, experience domestic violence in the course of their partnership across their lifetime. That's a lot. That 2018.
It has increased from 2018. I think the 2018 to 2020, it was 1 in 3, which seemed to be the global norm. And then in 2023, 2024, it just went to 44%, which is the last report that had been issued on it. But I wasn't asking you that, I was really trying to, I got all of that, what you told me, I went and I researched all of that and all that, so I could get that, But if you're saying these are the prescriptions to the problem, I will not know if it's a prescription. If I go to the doctor with an illness, he identifies the illness. Ray, good for you. You identify the illness. But what is the proof that the work that you all are prescribing?
Okay, yeah. That's what you're saying.
Being put into a data bank that we could say it is being effective. Where is that?
Okay. No, I think, a few things. There's a lot of things to say about that. First of all, the question of what is the parameters of the problem, it's difficult to know because we know underreporting is a big part of the fact pattern. Having said that, we also have database on those who make reports. And you're asking, what do we know about what works? Yes? Well, I don't think we know that. I don't think that we know really very much what works and why it works in Trinidad and Tobago. globally, we know what works is when you have to have laws in place through which people can access protection. But not only the laws must be in place, the laws must be implemented. You can have wonderful laws, but there's no implementation. So we know, first thing, that you have to have a regulatory framework in place which clearly defines what the problem is, which says who is responsible for addressing the problem, whether it's police, whether it's the courts, whether it's social services, whether it's the health sector, that everybody understands in the state where the responsibility lies for responding, and they are monitored in their response. We know that those are really important things. We also know what's also important is that there is a sustained socialization, let's call it a campaign in the social environment where people not only know about what domestic violence is, but they understand that there should be zero tolerance about it. In other words, we have to build a culture of zero tolerance, and you have to do that over time. So there are quite a few things that we know. We know you have to address masculinity. That what is it to be a man? We have to change people's minds about that. That control over, power over is not what constitutes masculinity or acceptable or healthy masculinity. We know healthy communications between adolescents, that's also part of it. I mean, there's whole books written on this, Karen, all right? So it's not like we don't know. But in Trinidad and Tobago, what we've been saying, what I have been saying, is that we need to do maybe more studies on the court process so we can follow people as they go through the court process and as they come out of it. So we kind of have a sense not only of what the challenges are in accessing the protection, but when they get it, what happens next. I think that's a kind of qualitative work that we need to do a lot more about to track.
Yes, you do, because if we went from 30% between 2018 and 2020, right? Well, that was the data that was given. And then you read the last report from the Office of the Prime Minister say that we have a 44%. It means we went up from 6,000 and some 250 between 2018 and 2018. And now we are 14%. We are beyond the global average. So something not working, right? So if something not working, then you have to look at your prescriptions and see which ones is working, which ones not working, and follow them through, because it doesn't make sense. I could write a thesis. They give me a consultancy, I will take it, right? And I could do the consultancy and I tell them all the things that you're supposed to say, but it means zero if you're not getting the results, because that's the point. And that is where I have a big problem. And by the way, before I finish and give it over to Dennise, obviously she sees I'm a little passionate about it because I did teach family law and I wrote on it. One of the things that you're being a little unfair about is this. When people get divorced, when people get separated, when marriages break up and you're looking at making orders, property adjustment orders, the courts have said time and time and time again that the woman's role as homemaker, and she doesn't have to be cooking, she doesn't have to be cleaning, the atmosphere that she creates in the home is equal to every dollar that the husband brings home. And when they make orders and they look at what they have to take into account, the courts do look at putting a monetary value equal to what the man's actual monetary value is, and that is in our Family Law Act. So it is not really fair to say that the law is biased against a woman in that regard. I have to make that point.
Sure, but I never said about the law being biased. I'm talking about in culture. Now, on the 44%, I just want to be clear because the statistics I have a little bit different, and it's not to diminish your point, because I think your point is very valid. But that Inter-American Development Bank study, which everybody quotes now, which says 44% of people in intimate partnerships over their lifetime experience some form of violence. The physical violence is the 30%.
Yeah, but what is domestic violence? You define it.
So, now let's tell you what that data is. So it's 44%, which would be economic, verbal, sexual, and physical. But the 30%, the 1 in 3, refers to the physical violence.
Yes. But when we cover all the other kinds of violence, so for instance, a man can decide he's not giving his wife any money.
Exactly.
That is a form of violence. That's a form of violence.
Yeah.
Sometimes the disrespect that they get, that you see, that is a form of violence.
Of course.
So to me, we need to just talk a little more about not just the physical violence, but the other
Right.
kinds of violence. And what do you think is the root cause of this level of violence?
And can I just say, Roberta, I mean, I have to say, I mean, I'm straight talk, bad manners. The fact of the matter that you,
Yeah.
when the Domestic Violence Act defines the acts of what constitutes domestic violence, financial abuse, a stalk with the intention to intimidate the person. There's a whole long list of what constitutes domestic violence. So put the hitting and the cuffing in one category. What about the psychological abuse? So many women they are afraid to leave. They are afraid to leave. They have no economic independence. A lot of the persons who are the victims of domestic violence are women who have a poor education, have 4 and 5 children, and they all constitute domestic violence. So putting the 1 and the 3 and the 44% don't make any difference, because then you're trying to say that that's not domestic violence.
Okay, we're talking about cross purposes here. I'm responding, first of all, to this idea that 44% represents an increase from 30% over time. That's
Right.
not what the statistics are telling us. The statistics are telling us, which are statistics from a survey, by the way, so let's not get caught up in it. A survey in 2018 that 44% of the women in the survey experienced some form of domestic violence, of which 30% of them are physical violence, another 10% of them are economic violence, another 11% of them are another 35% is emotional violence. So it's broken down. So we were talking, I was responding to your idea of increase, not whether or not one is a form of violence as opposed to another, because of course, even the Domestic Violence Act defines it very clearly. It's physical, it's sexual, it's emotional, psychological, it's financial. So, and this is all, I mean, we shouldn't be talking about that because there's no contest about that.
No, but the public may not know that.
Yeah,
you know that a lot of time you're talking a lawyer to lawyer. It's like it's not you and me having a little tea party, right?
Right. No, you're right.
Is talking to the public that a lot of women do not understand that when their husband call them MC and they're effing so and so and who you're sleeping with and which man you take and waking up from bed and cussing her up in front of children and disrespecting in front of her family and all of that. After a while, and then not giving her money, she have to beg him for money to buy groceries.
Right.
And some women don't even realize that what you're experiencing because he didn't hit you. He's smart enough not to hit you, right? So
think about the emotional abuse too. I think people, when they've experienced it, they kind of know what it is, but you're kind of hoping that it's going to change the next day, or you're kind of hoping that thing that tightens in your stomach when you're experiencing it, that maybe you're reading it wrong. Let's give him another chance. But when I was practicing law, people could very well describe when they came to me what all of that verbal abuse made them feel like, intimidated, made them feel less than, was insulted. The other thing about it is thinking about the kinds of emotional abuse. So let's talk about the Samantha Isaacs case. I think that's probably what prompted this.
The reindeer case?
The Todd Lampkin case. Todd Lampkin, the mother of Samantha Isaac, the recent case.
Sorry, I watched too much Netflix.
The judgment of Robin Muhammad, the case of Todd Lampkin, and her daughter Samantha Isaacs was murdered by her former partner. But the first incident was he took his hammer and he smashed her phone. He smashed the phone because he had been texting her constantly, which is a form of terrible, it's like cyber stalking. And afterwards, she just stopped answering the phone. And then he took a hammer and he smashed it. So it starts off like that. It starts off with a constant text and it goes to the smashing. He goes into her house, he smashes her house. He then puts a knife, he threatens her with a knife, then he threatens her with a gun. Eventually, he did shoot her dead. So you can see how it may start with an emotional abuse and escalates quite rapidly into something else. And so you are quite right. We have to really be very alert to where those signs of that thing that I keep talking about in the stomach. I point at my solar plexus. The thing that you, there.
Now we know who is the husband.
Yes, you don't know that. You don't know that.
You don't know that.
You don't know that. That's not
we did not see him.
You see, you're creating such mystery, Karen, right? Such mystery. Yeah. Yeah, I was saying, so it's important for all the listeners to think about, you must not minimize what you're feeling that
Right.
feels like abuse. Never minimize it. You have to examine it. Speak to somebody about it if you're not sure what's going on, but do not ignore behavior that makes you feel lesser than or afraid.
But then what is okay, this is with Dennise, sorry. I'm really concerned that, all the prescriptions that they have, protection orders, non-molestation orders, which run a wide gamut, occupation orders, which is about a last resort where the man can't be living in the house and so on. The problem with a lot of those kinds of orders, and I'm sure you have no cases of that. I do no cases of that. As you say, it's a power thing.
Mm-hmm.
You gone to court for me, you gone and embarrass me in the whole community for people to know, because they'll go to the magistrate's court. So now the whole world know what you say I have been doing to you in the home. And some men cannot take that, and they prefer to kill themselves and the wife. I know of a case like that. So sometimes you wonder if a protection order, it doesn't act as a trigger for more violence. I'm asking you.
The protection doesn't provide, you think the protection order may act as a trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
For
okay. It's again complicated. Karen, on average, over 9,000 applications for protection orders are made in this country every year. So
Okay.
it's quite a lot. So when we hear about the case where the person has a protection order and still killed, those are the minority of cases where protection orders are granted. We also know that quite a lot of cases protection orders are not granted, but that's perhaps a discussion for another day. So I would think that we can say that we know from the data that when women go to report to police, when they go and they make applications for protection orders, some women, that this is the moment perhaps of the highest risk, because it's the moment of reprisals. But I don't want us to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because for so many women, the protection orders have been effective, because the protection order is the way in which the state in all of its authority tells a perpetrator, we are not going to tolerate this, and her protection is our priority. The state does that. The court does that. The police, when they serve the protection order, when they enforce the protection order, they also tell the perpetrators, her life matters and we will protect her. So I don't think we should minimize the meaning of the protection order, the symbolism of a protection order, but also the practical protection that protection orders can give victims, which is why so many still apply for them. But yes, there are cases where the protection orders also, the moment of the protection order is also a moment of higher risk for victims. And it's particularly why we have asked, and it's in the new Domestic Violence Act, that the court orders a risk assessment before they grant a protection order, so the court has all of the information about the state of mind of the perpetrator, so they can grant a protection order that is tailored to the situation of the particular victim and the particular perpetrator.
Dennise is frozen.
Yes, I see she's frozen. I was thinking you might have been frozen too, but
No, my head is shaking.
yes.
Dennise,
But yes.
I'm talking about the risk factor. What are since Dennise has been, I wish she could join us, because I would like her to ask some of these questions.
She should probably go out and come back in.
Dennise,
at work.
David, you think you can get it to do that? Hello, David?
Yes, Karen.
Dennise is frozen.
Would you
And I
like
don't
to
think she
call her?
knows that she's frozen.
Let me see if I can call her on the phone and
She
link
has
up.
to go out and come back in, I would suggest.
Yeah. Let me link up with her and see if I can fix the problem.
Yeah.
In the meantime, you carry on.
Yeah, because one of these things, I know you know that probably well too, is that a lot of times you talk about reported. Do you think there's an underreporting of domestic violence
Oh,
And
yes.
there is, what would be the reasons for that?
That's definitely underreporting. And in fact, that, again, that IDB study showed that quite clearly as well. The majority of people may tell a family member, may go to the police, they may tell a family member, but many others just sort of suffer in silence for a long time. And why do they do that? One, they may be fearful. Oftentimes they're fearful to go to the police because of, again, the higher risk of reprisals on the moment of reporting. They may not fully trust that the police will cover them with protection because, of course, they have to go back home. Will the police be there in the home with them? So this whole question of, the fear, and then there's the stigma. Will people know that this is happening to me? Victims are often ashamed, and we keep telling victims, "You are the victim. You've done nothing wrong." Um, but they often feel a sense of stigma or, embarrassment to have to go and tell that story about being abused, which we would as well. All of us would feel that way. And then you spoke about financial dependency. Some people are dependent, or they may not be dependent, but you share children, and you're afraid that the money will be withheld as part of the control over the circumstance. So there's that. And then for a lot of women, they say, "But he's the father of my children. How can I go to the police for him?" So we know there's a complex web of I suppose considerations which keep victims, mostly women, silent for quite a long time before they may have to say, "I have to go to the police because the risk has escalated. I may be now at risk of losing my life." But yeah, so there are a number of factors. But the more we destigmatize domestic violence, victims of domestic violence, the more we support victims and survivors, the more we assure them of protection, I think that we will have more reporting because there's more trust in the system.
So another problem too, I'm waiting for Denise to come back.
Yeah.
Another issue, quite apart from the fact that sometimes women are reluctant to do it because usually, from the studies, it looks as though
Yeah.
a large majority of the victims of the that are reported are from a lower income and lower educational background, which means that if he goes to jail or if he does not obey the order that the court makes, then the breadwinner of the family, not only for her, but for the children, are affected.
Yeah.
But also, the reality is, oftentimes, we have now Lynette on air. Lynette is joining
Hi,
us.
Lynette.
I think this is getting even more thing. But Lynette, you are on at 5 o'clock. We're looking for Dennise. Yes, 5 o'clock.
Lynette, you're a little early.
We can't hear you. A lot of law books behind her.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was muted.
Yes,
Yeah.
so you're on at 5.
I'm waiting to come on at 5. So
Yes.
I'm just enjoying the
Okay.
conversation.
One of the things that I was going to ask is that a lot of times the police say that when the case comes, all of a sudden she has amnesia because he beat back up, do that, you mash up the family, who will take care of the children, and so on. I promise not to do that again. I'm going to counseling, whatever it is thing. So when the police say sometimes they get frustrated, they themselves feel frustrated. I'm just saying what I hear.
Yes,
that
of
they
course.
get frustrated, and then sometimes they are discouraged from coming to the taking a matter on domestic violence to the court and following it through because the virtual complainant has all of a sudden having a bout of amnesia.
Yeah.
How
I mean,
deal with
yeah,
these?
victims. I mean, police say that all the time. That
Yeah.
it's sometimes difficult because they do their part, and then the victim doesn't want to cooperate. But and that is certainly a fact. One of the features of domestic violence, which makes it quite unique. But you have to the police have to understand why victims would recant or would fail to cooperate because, in fact, maybe again comes back. They are fearful. Are the police going to be really fully protective of them? As you keep saying, there may be the economic circumstance. There may be the issue of the embarrassment and the stigma. We know the whole thing, which is why we say police have to be properly trained to understand the psychological dynamics of domestic violence. And having said that, the state, which means the all of us, the authority of the state that represents all of us, the state has its own independent duty to investigate and punish domestic violence, particularly when domestic violence is a crime. Wounding, beating, threatening to kill. These are crimes, irrespective of
why are they not put under the criminal code or criminal?
Exactly, but they can be. You see, we get a lot of the times we get caught up in the protection order. The protection order is, yes, within the control of the victim survivor, but the police have an independent power and duty to investigate crime and, if appropriate, to charge and prosecute.
Right.
So if somebody goes to you and says, the police, and say, he put a knife to my neck and he said, I'm going to kill you, then that's a crime. That's a threat to murder. So the police have to investigate that, and they have to arrest, and they have to charge. And then they have to take that person before the magistrate. The magistrate is going to have to say or whether or not that person gets bail, and then the risk assessment comes in again. If we give this man bail, what is the risk that he will perpetrate further abuse, and he will escalate that abuse? So there are tools to not eliminate all of the risk, but to manage the risk. And in fact, in the Domestic Violence Act, as I said, the magistrates are empowered to get risk assessment as a part of their information in granting the protection order. But also, when there's been a breach of a protection order and the magistrate has to decide whether or not to grant bail, a risk assessment is also included in the arsenal of the court. So you may find the person is a high risk, and therefore, no, we won't grant bail, because if they're out, they represent a threat to the protected person or virtual complainant, as the case may be. So yeah,
a little bit more about the risk assessment, because you're saying that's something new, and I didn't know that they had. Is it part of the law now, or an amendment to the law?
Yes. So Trinidad has a very good Domestic Violence Act. It's the third in the series of amendments. The first one, I think, in 1993, then in 1999, and now this one. I mean, substantive amendments, and each time the act gets stronger and more inclusive of an understanding of the complexity of domestic violence. But one of the things that the women's movement asks for is a risk assessment, because when you're granted protection, what is the kind of protection order you're going to need to grant that is very specific to the case you have before you? Is this person one of those perpetrators who will get so enraged by a protection order that they will perpetrate further and more violent violence? The risk assessment allows you to have a sense of the frame of mind of the perpetrator, and so therefore that you can make a decision about what is to be done.
So who does that risk assessment? Who is involved?
Well, the risk assessment is, that's the thing. I don't think that the risk assessment has been actually operationalized since 2020. Okay. I'm not sure about that. I think maybe Lynette can tell us more about that when she comes on. But the risk assessment is meant to be done by the appropriate social services agency. And I do know that there was some, and by the police as well. I do know that there was some initial working on defining a risk assessment, which is basically a questionnaire, tool which asks a series of questions, and then which can be kind of scientifically kind of analyzed to give you a sense of what the risk is. Is it a high risk, medium risk, or low risk that this person is going to reperpetrate and also be more violent in perpetration? In other countries, they call it a lethality assessment. How lethal is this person?
What kind of order? What kind of assessment?
They would say lethality. How lethal? How lethal?
Right.
Yes.
But Dennise, you have been missing. So take over for the next 6 minutes that we have.
So as we bring this section of the show to an end, Roberta, what do you think would be the most important messages you wish to communicate?
I think that I want to reiterate the message that came out of the case, the Samantha Isaacs case, is really the very powerful case that the state has a positive duty to protect when the state knows or ought to know that there's a risk of harm. So in the case of Samantha Isaac, she had made 4 police reports. So the
Mhm.
state knew. There was never any question. There was no denial of the fact that she had made those reports. But in fact, there was no effective or sufficient intervention to secure her. And so that I think is a very powerful message. I think we've been saying it, but actually to have a court endorse it. If the state knows, the state has a positive duty to intervene. And I want to also reflect on a case from the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, the case of Maria de Pena for a case in Brazil, where the commission said very clearly, in order for laws to protect women, they must be effectively implemented. And that's another way in which is similar to the positive duty reiterated by Justice Mohammed. And I think that's one thing I want to say. The laws have to be effectively implemented. The risk assessments have to be operationalized. When women get protection orders, or anyone gets a protection order, they must be effectively enforced. And women must feel that the police stations are safe spaces for them to go, and they will get a reliable response, reliable protective response. Similarly, that they can go to court. It will be timely and it will be efficient. They'll be in and they'll be out, because the court understands that there's something very important. I also want to just mention before I finish, there's a case from the Caribbean Court of Justice, which is the final appellate court for Barbados and 4 or 5 other jurisdictions in the Caribbean. And it's a case from last year where the court also says that the courts have to keep their gaze. They said the judicial gaze is very poetic language. The judicial gaze must be on the victim. And so in this case, the case of Samantha Isaacs, it seems that the judicial officer was thinking that the application for protection order was a tactic to get to maintenance. Now, by the way, I don't know that you should have to have a tactic to get child maintenance, right? But having said that, the judicial officer was sidetracked. Her gaze strayed away from protection of the victim to thinking about what the motivation could be. And so I think that's the other thing, that we have to keep our clear sight on the victim in front of us. And children, when they see violence, that's also being a victim of violence. And we have to take that seriously. When you're a child and you witness violence, you are a victim of violence. And in fact, Karen, the 2020 reforms included that.
Visiting non-cohabitational relationships and a child witness.
Yes.
Have been included as applicants who can apply through an adult for an order. Yes.
And also, I should say, on who's eligible to make a protection order, also people who are in dating relationships, regardless of sexual orientation. Regardless of sex, are very important.
Where is that? Because there have been these things. I know St. Lucia did it recently, but we always had single man and single woman. And
well, it's still defined as relationships akin to marriage, still defined visiting, but the dating relationship, which is a new relationship of eligibility for protection orders, is not constrained by sexual orientation in its definition.
Does it say so expressly, or you are?
Well, in the sense, to the extent that the other features of unions are defined in a heterosexual way, the dating relationship is not so defined.
All right. I have a feeling that is not the end on that.
No, I think so. Let's say at least that's my advocacy.
I'm not that I'm against it. I just think that it has been such a big issue. Guyana allows same sex. St. Lucia very recently did that. And, but it's very clear. It's very clearly stated. Whereas in our legislation, we go to pains to talk about some jurisdictions say, like Antigua's, the man must be single and the woman must be single. Right? Whereas we don't say you have to be single, but you have to be a heterosexual couple. But I am not going to quibble about what a dating or visiting relationship is. And a child witness certainly does not have a gender attached to him or her. Mm-hmm. Yes. But talking with you. So much knowledge, Dennise.
So I've been in and out, and I'm not apologizing for the digitization that we're supposed to have in this country. I'm not apologizing, but it's not good.
Yes.
But Leonard is here, though, with us.
Leonard is here. So, Roberta, would you like to just stay on for a little while with Lynette so that we can just have a a big
Sure.
conversation. So,
Via-
Lynette, please turn on your audio. Yes, there you are.
Here I am. Yes.
Welcome to Hard Talk. And Hard it's
Sounds like the
hosted.
BBC.
Well, we're trying.
Yeah, but what we try to do, although you'd asked some questions before then, and I want to thank you for joining us. One of the things we try to do is to really use this as a tool for education of the public. We don't get into the politics and the bacchanalia. That's not our role. Our role, as much as possible, is to use what we call subject matter experts, which you and Roberta are both subject matter experts. And I know that Denise's style is to ask them to say something about you that they might not know. But everybody knows that you're president of the Law Association. Okay?
Yes.
I think so.
Everybody knows all of those things. Lynette,
Yes,
tell us
yes,
something
yes.
that we don't know about you.
Yes. Well, I think what you don't know. Well, I think that maybe everybody knows that, for perhaps from the inception of my career, when I got called to the bar in 1977, somewhere in about 1980, I, along with many other actors in the society, began calling for a remedy to deal with domestic violence. So I don't know that is really something new, but it is something that Roberta and I have been laboring in the vineyard over many, many years. And culminating, as Roberta did say, with the recent 2020 amendments. And I just want to endorse what she said, that we have one of the best regimes of legislation.
That's true.
In I dare say, we are ahead of the United Kingdom, not only in the Commonwealth and in the world, in terms of the legislation and the mechanisms that we have put in place on paper.
That is true.
But if it is that I can take off from where Roberta left off, as it were, and where these mechanisms and this legislation fails, although we have so many NGOs working in the field, we have so many agencies within the police that have been created for the purpose of administering the domestic violence legislation. One of the things we have to constantly bear in mind is the question of the resources and the training and what it is that the police have to work with. Because we do have the unit that has been created within the police service, right? The gender-based violence unit, I think is what they call it, the gender-based violence unit, headed up by Assistant Superintendent Guy Aline. But one of the interesting things that she said to me is that there has been no addition to the number of police officers in the police service for the purpose of them taking on this gargantuan task. So that it is the same force of police officers who have been deployed from whatever it is that they did before that are now expected to, according to the legislation, investigate every single complaint of domestic violence that is made to them. You see? So, and what we have to remember is that those officers are the very officers culled from our society who carry all of the biases, all of the bad behavior, all of the poor socialization, all of the destructive behavior within relationships and towards their women folk that everybody else suffers from. So that, I just want to endorse what Roberta said. We have something around an average of about 9,000 applications that are made on average every year. And the thing is that for the police, and those are just the applications that are made. But when it comes to the question of reports that are made to the police, I mean, I can't begin to think of what number of reports are made to the police. And I dare say that they are overwhelmed by the task at hand. I mean, to investigate every single complaint of domestic violence is a gargantuan task. And I think that if I want to comment on the Todd Lampkin case that was just decided, what that case decided was that notwithstanding all the fine mechanisms that we have on paper, it was the failure of the police to utilize the mechanisms that they had available to them, and the failure of the judiciary to be sensitive. Indeed, the magistrate appeared to be hostile to the applicant. Because if you look at the facts of that case, the facts of that case were that over the period 2015 to when she died, I think it was 2017, over the period of 2015 to 2017, I believe it is, she had made 4 complaints to the police. And during the course of the case, which was a case in which her survivor, because she was killed, her former partner killed her, he shot her. And so the case was brought by her mother on behalf of her mother and her son as a constitutional motion to claim that her right to life had been breached, her right to the protection of the law had been breached, and the right to the respect for family life had been breached in respect of her mother and her son, because she had met her death, notwithstanding that 2 days before she was shot to death, she had reported that an incident to the police. And what came out in the evidence is that she had made an application for a protection order, and the magistrate declined to grant the protection order and kept querying with her what were her motives for bringing the protection order, notwithstanding that she had made complaints of the most egregious kind. The gentleman had threatened her with a knife, he had threatened her with a gun. There was assault, breaking into her house, mashing up her personal property. Of course, he had failed to provide financial support as well. Online threats, publishing nude pictures of this woman online. These kinds of threats that he made, and so that she had accessed the remedies that were available. She had approached the police. The magistrate declined to act by granting her protection order, notwithstanding that at an earlier stage in the proceedings, the gentleman had offered to give an undertaking that he would not engage in acts of domestic violence, which, if taken by the magistrate, actually constitutes a protection order. So when he said to the magistrate, I am prepared to give an undertaking, the magistrate told him to go and get an attorney. And then finally, on one of the occasions when the application for the protection order came up, incidentally, a protection order had never been granted to her, although she had applied to it. On one of the days when the application came up and she did not appear, the magistrate dismissed the application. So the judge had many harsh things to say about the response of the police and the response of the judiciary in failing in this particular case. And it is really a landmark case, because the case is not a reflection on the quality of the legislation or the regime or the protections that we have created, but it is a reflection on the quality of the response. That the police dropped the ball and the magistracy dropped the ball. And in fact, when the case was going on, the attorneys for the state, because it's a constitutional motion against the state did not offer any explanation as to, or they didn't even try to say that the police had fulfilled their statutory duty to investigate. And I want to endorse what Roberta said. When a person comes to the police to say that domestic violence has been committed against them, they can be speaking of a whole variety of different kinds of assault. And then they can also speak about emotional and psychological abuse, which is very, very well articulated and defined to cover every conceivable thing you can think about that can fall within the definition of emotional and psychological abuse.
Well, can I ask you this, then, Dennise, not to, Lena, just not to cut your chain of thought,
yes.
Talking about what has been done to respond. The Prime Minister has called domestic violence and as a public health emergency. And according to Minister Dayal Singh, they have put in place a psychosocial needs assessment, and they have trained over 250 case workers. And of the 250 case workers, they have trained 25 trainers to train, because they recognize the psychological and social component of domestic violence. So I just putting it on the table for which you can respond to that.
Well, what I'm going to say is that all of those measures that have been spoken about have been in place before.
Right.
This case was decided just a couple of days ago. This is a very, very recent case. The point I was making was that the domestic violence legislation specifically empowers the police, separate and apart from the question of the applicant applying for a protection order, which is a sort of quasi-civil remedy, telling you not to do something that you're not supposed to be doing anyway. But the police also, it is specifically stated in the legislation, they also have the power to charge you for any criminal offenses that have been complained about. So that if you slap a stranger in the street, that is an assault for which the police can charge. And if similarly you slap your wife, that is the offense of assault for which the police can charge. But I dare say that so overwhelmed is the whole system and so egregious is the problem that when women go to the police station, from the time the police hear that this is within the sphere of intimate partner violence, what they do is they send you to the magistrate to make an application for a protection order, and they drop their responsibility to also charge the alleged perpetrator with whatever is the assault offense that has been complained of. So you see, it is not anymore a question of the powers of the police. It is firmly in the sphere of resources that are dedicated to solving the problem, the socialization and the training and the retraining and the constant training, and I dare say the initial appointment of the cadre of officers who are going to be dealing with this. Because no matter how much, I mean, if you got training maybe when you were in the police academy, and after 5 years you have not been retrained, if it is that you yourself might have a protection order against you as a police officer, you may not be the best person.
I would think not.
Receiving a complaint.
Can I just say something? Sorry to drop in. I know that I'm on Lynette's time. Lynette, I think you said very diplomatically about police being overwhelmed, but the decision, you would have to say almost, or the omission of police to charge is kind of historic. It's not just now that the police don't charge, and that's part of the holdover that somehow domestic violence is different from crime. And it's, in the old time days, they would say it's man-woman business, it's man-woman story. And police would actually tell people who are before them, why don't you all try to work it out? So in the training, we're trying to get the police to understand that's not an appropriate state response. And by the way, under Offenses Against the Person Act, even harassment is a crime. So many of what we call psychological abuse has now been criminalized. Trinidad really has good law.
Yes, that is the
thing. Both Lynette and Roberta, it is a fact that a lot of times the police will not pursue a matter because it's 3-4 times she come and complain about how the husband thing, and then when she go back home, he might be facing jail. He make back up with her. Then she has to study who is going to be the breadwinner for the family and all of those things. And the police themselves, let us at least give them, they are not here represented. So I'll try to represent them as much as I can. That can't they then say how many times they have been frustrated when persons come to them complaining, and when the matter goes before the court or even before, it's a waste of police time because these same complainants will not follow through.
No,
Karen, you can't do that.
No.
Karen, although you say you're representing the police who are not with us, once a charge has been laid, it has to go through the system and come to its completion. You can't just say, I'm frustrated, find another job. But you have to take responsibility and do what you're supposed to do.
That's Elena's experience.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that in the first instance, when somebody comes to the police station to complain of a domestic violence event, and they send you, they send you to the magistrate's court. They shirk their responsibility in the first place to investigate. They have to investigate what is a crime. And it is really in the rare case that they themselves are put in the position where they have brought brought a case and the witness does not turn up.
Right.
That's the problem. When it's a two-tiered remedy that is created. The first tier of the remedy is the quasi-civil remedy, where it's in the nature of an injunction. You're not supposed to be doing what you shouldn't be doing anyway. So there's no punishment attaching to the first stage of the remedy. You're just given an order. You're not supposed to be doing what you're not supposed to be doing. But when now those very women now go to the police to complain that there has been a breach of the protection order, that is the second level of the remedy, where it is not just a civil remedy now. The police can now, and this is the difficulty, the police now have a discretion to exercise whether they are going to charge for a criminal offense, and that is where the system falls down completely, because they're not charging, they don't want to charge. So it frequently doesn't even reach to the stage where anybody has to come to court and give evidence on what they have charged, because they're not charging.
Exactly.
It is different to certain other jurisdictions where, for example, Barbados, where if there's a breach of the protection order, it's not the discretion of the police to decide whether they are going to charge you for breach of the protection order.
No, it triggers a warrant.
For the breach of the protection order. I think that is the law in my understanding in Barbados. But in Trinidad and Tobago, when the matter really hits the road and you have breached the protection order now, you can't find a police officer willing to charge. And they have to go through the whole laborious process of investigating, because there are centers where they are supposed to be dedicated dealing with it, but that is no excuse that the victims don't turn up. Because if it is that somebody comes to the police station bleeding out a black eye, they are the ones who have to charge for the assault.
I think that is changing a bit, Lynette. I have a sense, because of the Special Victims Unit, I think the Gender-Based Violence Unit is either part of that or has now been renamed.
Yeah.
But I think there's more charging than there used to be, but still not the level of charging commensurate with the level of violence being perpetrated.
And then, and then what happens when the charge is made? Is the charge is not going into the domestic violence court. The charge is tossed into the whole morass of all other criminal offenses. There are no trained prosecutors to deal with this. When a police prosecutor is faced on a day with 10 or 15 cases, he's not giving any attention to the domestic violence case. He doesn't consider that to be an important case. He may not even have informed the victim that she has to come to court on that day. So, you see, it is a question of the society putting its money where its mouth is. If it is,
I want to ask you two questions before I ask Dennise, which is going to take over on me. Two questions. I had asked Roberta, and Roberta told me, of course, same sex. And she said same sex, although I see that one of the senators, Hazel Thompson, objected to including same sex under the domestic violence law. And in any event, I know that in many jurisdictions, it has to be a male and a female, and they will allow visiting relationships. Our own does. Visiting relationship qualify, and we also qualify a child witness. But what is the position with same sex? And secondly, aren't there also cases with the men? Because we're doing as though only women are victims of domestic violence. I think there are a lot of men, and those ones don't get reported, because if you want to know why, if the woman is shamed to go, he's more shamed than her to go to things. So I don't know, from your experience as a practitioner, both of you, what you have to say on those 2 points.
Okay, now to start off, the first thing is the definition of cohabitant under this act specifically excludes same-sex relationships. And that is something that, in spite of our advocacy over many years, did not find its way into the 2020 amendment. Because let me read for you what the definition of cohabitant says. It says cohabitant means a person
has a book right here
who is living with a person of the opposite sex. So that is immediately where the same-sex relationship is excluded from relief under the act, except, as Roberta said, when the act was being amended in 2020, and the categories of persons was being expanded, we were able to sneak in the definition. Well, we were able to put in, let me just not say
Yeah, put it that way.
new definition of dating relationship. And the dating relationship did not have the definition of dating relationship said means the dating relationship means a relationship where the parties do not live together in the same household, but may be engaged in romantic, intimate, or sexual relations. So there was not the qualification that the relationship must be between persons of the opposite sex.
So what does that mean then?
That means we have to test that. That means that is a test case right there.
So I think it has been accepted I understand, by the court, that under the dating relationship, anyone, regardless of sexual orientation, can access protection orders.
So here's my question.
I haven't heard of an actual case, but that is great because that's exactly what the legislation.
I believe that those cases are going through court. Maybe there's some trouble. Sorry, Dennise.
My observation is that same-sex relationships are increasing in its numbers when I reflect on it now as opposed to many, many years ago. So what will happen in a same-sex relationship when one person there's violence committed to one person? What is their option?
Battery, assault and battery.
They have the same options.
Criminal law.
Where the domestic violence is broken down into different categories. You have physical, sexual, emotional, or psychological, or financial abuse.
If it is recognized.
Well, physical, sexual, emotional, psychological, or financial. You can be clearer than that.
And what I mean is,
yes,
if you recognize same-sex relationships, but if we do not recognize, we are going to the Privy Council with it, and I think they're going to the Privy Council because they want to get the final decision from the court that it is not a criminal act for two consenting adults of the same sex to engage in intimate relationships. I think that is what they want, right? That's my take on that. But I'm saying domestic violence.
Yes.
If it clearly says of the opposite sex, they didn't do that by chance. They did that deliberately.
No, they did it very deliberately. And they also did it with respect to the Equal Opportunity Act.
Right.
If you want to bring a claim of discrimination on the basis of sex,
yes,
it has to be persons of the opposite sex.
Right.
Not persons of the opposite sex, but persons who have an alternative sexual orientation cannot make an application under the Equal Opportunity Act that they have been discriminated against on the basis that they are gay.
Right.
Now, there is a very recent and important case in which a gay person was able to get a remedy because they were sexually harassed.
Right. That
is the Cascadia case. But they did not get the remedy
under the Equal Opportunity
because they did not get the remedy on the basis that they were discriminated against because they were gay. They got the remedy on the basis that they were being sexually harassed.
A piece of legislation in which you are very much involved.
Yes. So basically, emotional and psychological abuse, the act covers the gamut of everything that you could possibly think about, including stalking, which is already a crime, disseminating intimate images, every
telephone, electronic communication,
all of that. It's there. And
can I just answer Dennise though a bit, if I can? Just answer Dennise. Okay, so Dennise, the fact is that under the criminal law, anybody, regardless of orientation, can go to the police and complain if a criminal offense has been committed against them. Sexual orientation is immaterial to that. Now, under the protection scheme of the Domestic Violence Act, if you're in a domestic relationship, if you're married or in a cohabiting relationship, or if you're in visiting, which we understand, you can make an application for protection orders. But those relationships are defined in a heterosexual way.
Yes.
In the Act. However, this 2020, and Lynette said it, this 2020 regime creates another kind of relationship under which you can access protection orders. And that other kind of relationship is called a dating relationship. And that's a relationship where the people are not living together, but maybe in a romantic or intimate partnership. So it's in that, and that's not limited by sex orientation. So under a dating relationship, if you're in a same-sex relationship and you're experiencing domestic violence in that relationship, there is arguably, very strongly arguably, a way for you to access the court through the eligibility because you are in a relationship that is a dating one.
Roberta, can I just respond to that? Because I just want to respond to that because, I wrote a textbook on looking at that whole thing. And so I had to look at all the other jurisdictions. And some of the other jurisdictions do recognize a visiting a non-habitational relationship. They do recognize it have to have certain features. But they all have that. Some of them are stricter. Some of them say not only must you be of the opposite sex, but they go to say it must be a single man and a single woman. Yes. So when they go to define dating or visiting relationship, they mean it. You have to take like an omnibus, take it in the context of the section itself. Yeah. But so anyway, that is something that has to be.
I just want to say on that, I mean, Karen, of course, you're the law professor amongst us here, but statutory interpretation, right?
Was.
The statutory interpretation. All of the other relationships, they actually define it. In dating relationship, they do not.
Okay, well, anyway, it could have been.
And Roberta, all of you, I am not the person with the legal background.
Yes. I am
the person on the maxi taxi.
But a bright one, an intelligent one on the maxi taxi.
I'm still saying to you that if my relationship is with a woman and I'm being financially abused, what are my options?
You don't have
I don't know what your options are,
if you're dating, if you are dating this person, you can make you can go to the magistrates court or the district courts, as they now call them, or the masters of the and ask for a protection order on the basis that you have been the victim of financial abuse. Yes. If it is that you are living with a woman and that woman takes away your salary every month and hides your keys and will not leave the house that is owned by you or for which you jointly pay the rent, or will not pay one half of their rent, and you can't get rid of them. There are a myriad of circumstances in which you could define, right, the financial abuse that you are getting. And then the question of what is the remedy do you want for that? If it's a dating relationship and you want an order that they are not to come back into the house.
Occupation order.
Well, fine, you can get an order excluding them from the home. You can even get an order if you don't want that they stop living with you, that they pay half the rent.
Yes.
I mean, the orders can condescend to the most.
Yes, it can.
The most detailed particulars. But if we come back to the question of what this Totkin case has meant for us now, I think the Totkin case is really a wake-up call to the powers that be, the executive, the persons who have the power of the purse, that they now have to look to the question of, okay, so we've done all of the legislation and so on, but they have now been found specifically responsible for a remedy against the state, not the police. It's not any police officer going to have to pull any money out of his pocket, but the taxpayer, the state, is now going to be increasingly liable to pay damages for if the police fail in their duty. The duties are already clearly articulated and defined. If they fail to investigate, if they fail to take protective measures, this is it. You see, it's a question of they have to investigate and they have to put operational measures into place. So I dare say all of the organizations in which Roberta and I operate together, the whole of the NGO sector, because there's a massive NGO sector in Trinidad and Tobago dedicated to the question of intimate partner violence and so on. We now have to go back to the drawing board now and start to now create the protocols that we want the police to put in place and the judiciary and the magistrate to put in place now. Because it's no longer a question of what the law is. It's a question of what the resources are. and what are the protocols to operationalize the laws. You see?
Yeah. One thing I just wanted to mention too, which is to show the strength of our legislation. As you said, at the end of the day, it's about implementation. Because I don't think you could get a stronger domestic violence legislation. Because I've looked at the legislation through Jamaica's own is terribly weak. I don't know if they've done something in the last few years, but to my knowledge, it's one of the weakest ones. Sorry, Jamaica. But cohabitation, usually in order to be considered a spouse, you have a 5-year period. They don't put.
We don't have that in our domestic violence legislation.
Yeah, and in every other thing, whether it is wills or intestacy, whether it is
or the cohabitation in relation to this act,
everything else, you have to show a 5 years continuous cohabitation immediately before. In our Domestic Violence Act, they do not put a time frame.
No,
a year, and that is another very positive thing.
You're correct. You see, if we were to talk about what are some of the things we can do now to get us out of this turmoil of every Monday morning you're getting up and you're seeing another awful story in the newspaper.
Yeah. What can we do?
One of the prescriptions in the legislation is that the police have a duty to protect the victim, to look after the children, and to see what they can do to prevent further abuse. But what they do not have the power to do is to remove the perpetrator from the home. Now,
what about the occupation order?
They cannot remove. Well, they
can have an exclusion order.
The police. I'm not talking about the application for the protection order. The magistrate can give you exclusive occupation order. But when the police are faced with a situation, they come to the house and they are witnessing the domestic violence taking place. They do not have a policy under which they operate that they are going to remove the perpetrator from the
But Lynette, they can arrest. They can arrest without warrant in that situation, and that's equivalent to an exclusion.
They can arrest. But do they?
They can. But not they don't have the powers. They can
and then
arrest.
the thing is that when they arrest, they can arrest and they can charge for the assault crime.
Bail.
And then bail arises. You see, so what do we do?
And then your risk assessment then becomes relevant
becomes relevant because we operate in a common law system where there is practically a right to bail, and you now even have a right to bail for murder. So you can imagine.
Yeah, but that is the. But oh gosh, but Lynette, in all fairness, I read the case. In all fairness, it is the exception rather than the rule, and it is based on common law, right? And it's the way that it has been expressed in the newspapers. You swear people who are on murder charges can get bail. It is no different than it was in England under the common law. And
it's no idea there. But the point
rather
is,
than the rule that you could ever get bail.
I want to ask Dennise a question.
I want to ask
Dennise a question because I see Dennise, you have a very varied background, but you're also now a therapist, and I think you've been sort of paying attention to on a level of psychology, social psychology.
Yeah,
I mean, we, as Lynette said, we're in the vineyards, and a lot of us addressing it through kind of a legalistic lens. But of course, it's a social problem, a social psychological problem, which we also have to address. And I was wondering, what are you seeing, and what would you tell us, those of us who are working in this field, in relation to our approach?
I think we are seeing a tremendous increase in domestic violence, and we are seeing a lot of people feeling very helpless. And they're helpless because they just don't feel safe. They're afraid to go to the police station. They're afraid if they get that order, that might be an opportunity to increase their level of risk. So our society has to start to go down to the root causes and start to think through how are we going to help people to change the way that they are. So, for example, in a number of the policemen ignore when people still go in. You go to the domestic violence unit and they have a good talk. They tell you they're well organized and so on. But there are a number of victims whom I have been in touch with who have felt that, okay, I went to the police station, I went to the domestic violence unit, but I am still in trouble because he can still come home. He came back home, he beat me and so on. And a lot of women will not leave their relationships because they can't sustain themselves. If they walk away from the relationship, how will I get money? How will my children survive? So I think that the bottom line of all of this is that we have to transform, and this sounds as if I think it happened overnight. No, but we have to transform the way we think and the respect we have for each other. And that, to me, it sounds like a very simplistic thing, but it is that respect for each other. And I even go as far as respect from the point of view of leadership. And we need to transform all of that if we're going to transform the society.
Absolutely, leadership. And in terms of what practical measures can be taken where you have those societal pressures operating, preventing women from, dealing with their situation, it demonstrates the myriad of ways in which NGOs, even government ministries, government departments, civil society organizations can reach out to help women where they maybe have got a protection order, but they know that a protection order is a piece of paper. They need agencies to walk the walk with them. There are a number of agencies who do that walking with them. For example, the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. A lot of the work that they do is that when a case is brought to their attention, and Roberta, being an immediate past president of that association, will bear me out here, they actually walk people through the process. I mean, that needs to be, increased 100-fold, where people feel that civil society does have a responsibility along with the judiciary and the police. For example, employers. One of the innovations in the legislation is that it has, the new amendments, is that it has created a duty on the part of persons in a certain kind of relationship to victims, to a mandatory duty to report. So that persons in institutions or teachers or doctors who observe domestic violence taking place, or children being the victim of it, or vulnerable women being the victim of it, they have a responsibility under the Act, which I don't think has been sufficiently broadcast to the public or operationalized. I mean, I have known cases of women who have protection orders, and the employers will refuse to honor the protection order by preventing the perpetrator from coming onto the workplace and so on. So that, everybody has to throw up. All agencies have the bystander has to throw up a network of protection against persons who are suffering from domestic violence, because they cannot do it alone. They can't do it.
I think, sorry, Elena, I want with that, and I think my time to leave is just now. But Dennise,
No, you stay on. We're happy to have you, Roberta.
What Dennise said, I think, is really important. It's about how do you build trust in a system of protection, so that anyone who's a victim can go expecting to be well received and expecting to be covered with protection and expecting to get a fair hearing. And you do that trust is built day by day, person by person, when you have lines of accountability for action. So you go to the police station, you don't get any good response, or you get a careless response or indifferent response. Where do you take that? You can go to police complaints authority, I suppose, but is there, what we've been asking for is a very direct line of accountability. So you go there, you don't get the response that you want. What happens in real time? What do you do with that? Anyone should be able to trigger the next level of attention so that everyone understands that they are going to be scrutinized. Police understand that we're going to be scrutinized for action or omission. And so I think we have to embed, so training is important. Of course, training is always important, from recruitment all the way through. But more than training, I think we need this accountability mechanism to be triggered. So in real time, we're able to correct what is happening so that women's lives or people's lives are saved. I think build trust.
Do you think we need an amendment? How do we bring that about? Do you think we need to push for an amendment to the Act, or we need to be dealing with the Commissioner of Police and the
I think that this case has filled a gap, because it says very clearly that once as we said earlier, once the state authorities know or ought to know that there's a risk, they have a duty to act. So I think, in a sense, that is a gap that has been quite that existed before. Everybody would say, but of course the police should act. We've always said that at a common sense level. But now the law is saying, you know it. If you know it, you have to do something about it,
But
and that thing that
the
you
act
do has to
already
be
says
effective.
that. The
So in
act
other words, the
already.
law has to be implemented.
But Roberta, the
I
act
say
already
something.
says that every single report of domestic
Yeah,
violence
you're right.
has to be investigated. So that is already there in the act. The act says that in words of one syllable.
But I
Lynette,
suppose what
Lynette,
this judgment does, it gives you a remedy when it doesn't happen. A
What-
remedy which
that's a
the taxpayers will feel.
Right, but you need to mobilize a senior council to bring a constitutional motion. I mean, how
Lynette, can I just say something to all? I am not going to be a lawyer now. I'm going on that maxi taxi. All right? I am going on the maxi taxi. And I'm going to tell you, Lynette, I know you were very much involved in the 1981 suite of legislation that would reform a lot of. My father actually gifted me the whole set. So I know that you were very, very much involved in it. And so much of it has not been passed, especially that dealing with registered, the RPO, making the whole system RPO as they have in St. Lucia and so on. What does that tell you? So many pieces of legislation either lapse or not implemented. I am of the view that we have acknowledged from your report what are the roots of the violence. It's economic distress, power issues, historical reasons, deep-rooted cultural factors, ethnicity, income, location, gender identity, sexual orientation, alcohol and drug use. We have identified so many of the reasons why. But I think in my simple way, I think that from the very beginning, when children enter into school, that part of the curriculum has to include how men, boys and girls, mummies and daddies and whoever relate to each other, and with things that we can't do, not only because it is not right to do it, but it could land you in jail. And you have to teach. I think it has to start from there, because a lot of the anger these men show, beating a woman, hitting a woman is a issue of power. You see his father do that. It's a cultural thing. He on drugs, he on alcohol. It's all kinds of things. I think we have to start with the little children and start to put in them that is not acceptable. Hitting a woman is not. You see if your child hit a girl, you tell them one time, don't let me ever see you do that again. And the example has to be set by the parent. And there are many families, they may have other problems in their home, but one of the things they learn is, you see, hitting a woman, don't put your hand on a woman.
So Karen, what was the question you wanted to ask?
No, I said that in the prescriptions, we put together a whole set of a smorgasbord of prescriptions, okay, which both Lynette and Roberta say that we have very strong legislation. Okay. Obviously, problem is execution, implementation. And we have seen that across the board with so much legislation. So I'm a cynical person, but the best predictor of future behavior is past relevant behavior. So what can we do from the at the home, in the school curriculum? You have to have half an hour a week or something teaching. Hitting is no, you never hit a girl. Boys never hit.
But Karen.
Yes.
In terms of, you have to understand, in terms of planning your strategy for getting that, what you're talking about there, implemented, you have to acknowledge, I'm not saying it can't be done, but you have to acknowledge some of the impediments that will be in your way and devise strategies to deal with those impediments.
Right.
Because up to now in Trinidad and Tobago, we have not been able to implement a proper curriculum for family life education in schools. And it has to do with the question of the plural makeup of our society, where you have different groups who are very suspicious of each other. And one group does not want the other group teaching their children about this or that. So the achieving of the consensus as to what is going to go into this teaching of respectful relationships and family life education, it goes beyond a boy hitting a girl. It is the whole question of violence as the method of resolving your conflict. You see? So
we have to try, though. We have to try.
You have to try.
Genuinely
you have to understand what you're up against, because
you will know more than I.
Can I say something about maybe the question of men as well?
Yeah.
Because, of course, Karen, men do also experience the domestic violence, but we know from the historical records, when I say even recent, that maybe 75 to 80% of the applications made are made by women, similarly to reports to the police. And it's a global pattern. I think we also have to have an approach to understand. So it comes back to gender equality. How do we socialize from the very earliest stage, babies, preschool children in school, all the way through the process, that girls and boys are equal and are to be equally valued, and that we don't, put children in sort of boxes of what is a girl and what is a boy, which may also mean we don't treat boys more harshly in schools than we treat girls. We don't do more corporal punishment. All the things that create a tolerance for violence, we have to be thinking about those things as we raise children.
But can we at least for the domestic violence issue? Because all of these are prescriptions to deal with a problem. If you could eradicate 50% of that problem by telling little boys and little girls who don't know better, hitting is not acceptable. Children do understand.
They also must not be hit. Not only is hitting not acceptable, they must not be hit.
Exactly. So then you deal with the community thing. But I'm talking that we start with the little children. I really, really believe it can have impact. And, for example, there was a piece of legislation, oh God, it just slipped my mind, where they felt that it would not have been implemented. And it was implemented. It took time for it to be implemented. And it was implemented. But I truly believe that if you start from home with the little children and in school, do little, you have little, go on YouTube. They have all kind of YouTube thing. So you put on a little YouTube thing and let children, and then you ask them, do you think you should do that? No, that's not right.
Karen, I do not think that we should only identify hitting. What has been discussed is how do we change the education of our people so that there's more empathy, so that there's more respect. You can't only focus on...
Really hitting is about that. Or maybe not putting it well.
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe I'm not phrasing it well.
Yeah.
We are almost at the end. And here's a question I would like to ask both Roberta and Lynette. What do you hope to achieve in the next, let's say, 5 years in the work against domestic violence? What would you like to see happen?
I personally would like to see a revolution in the approach of the attitude of the particular personnel who have to administer this. I'm talking at the level of, okay, the issue has happened and we now have to deal with it, okay? The question of the allocation of resources, the question of the training of the police, the question of the implementation of the lethality assessment, the question of the working with the victims, the assistance that all of the different agencies in the society can work together in partnerships to help persons who are in this situation. And I want to refer to that study that Roberta referred to, the IDB study, which said that no matter all of the things that we have been doing with dealing with domestic violence, the society has still not found a way to permit women to exit safely from abusive relationships, to solve the problem of how they are going to earn a living, living independently, and how they are to house their children. This is what that study said. No matter all the different things, all the prescriptions, all the legislation, all the programs, we still have not hit upon the method of, and it goes to the point of your greatest vulnerability. It's when you try to exit the relationship, and as a follow-on from that, when you go to make the application for the protection order, the society still has not found the prescription of that. How to assist women to safely exit, how to find housing, how to find work. So I think we need to try and concentrate on the mechanisms to deal with that, whether it is civil society partnerships with all of the different agencies of the state that are dedicated to housing, that are dedicated to family support. You know, there are all of the what you call them, the service organizations. They're always looking for projects. What are they to do, right? All these shelters. How do we attack that problem? Women, what do we do? Do we do a survey to see how many women there are? Or do we employ partnerships between the state and the civil society to practically grid or create a network of what number of people we are dealing with? How does the HDC, for example, deal with vulnerable women in the question of exiting a violent relationship, getting priority for a home? Is it that big employers are going to set about thinking about quotas for how many people they are going to employ who are vulnerable women who need a job? Okay, that kind of thing. I think that is what I would like to see.
Well, somebody has to lead it. Somebody has to lead it.
Leadership. Somebody on this
program. I think somehow I'm looking at one of the leaders right now.
No. All right. So, Roberta, what is your response to that question? What do you hope to achieve in the next 5 years or so in the work you're doing?
Better understanding, better response, better prevention. When I say better understanding, what are the root causes of domestic violence? We cannot be keeping talking about it at a superficial level. This is profound. If the majority or close to the majority of women are experiencing the same thing, that means that there's a sociology at work. There's a social structure at work. We have to address the social structure. And that addressing is about inequality, the different valuing of women, men, boys, and girls. We talk about domestic violence, but we didn't talk about how much sexual violence is happening against girls in this country. It's all part of one fact pattern. So to better understand what is happening and why it is happening. Secondly, and that we don't have mixed messages about it. Our messages have to be very clear, zero tolerance, a better response. So when it has happened, how do we stop reoccurrence? That you have very accountable policing, and we know we haven't had improvements, but we need more than that. And the improvements have to be in every station in the country, and there has to be accountability for inadequate response in real time. So a better response, more timely court process as well. Hopefully that will happen with the district courts online. Domestic Violence Act is meant to be in and out. You said 7 days to the first hearing. We have cases that go on over a year, 9 months, 10 months. And every time the person comes to court, there's a moment of risk. So that we really get to cut down on the time of hearing and determination of cases. So that's the response. And that people can go to safe houses. Those safe houses are well managed and also are financed so that there's accommodation if you need to have accommodation. So that's the response has to do with the police, with the courts, with the health sector, with social services, housing,
and NGOs.
And then, and if NGOs are doing it, the NGOs should have proper subventions for doing that. And the third thing, better prevention. We have to inculcate this thinking in schools. And that means how do we treat children? How do we treat children in schools? Dennise used the word well, she's a therapist, empathy and equality. Education for empathy and equality. When children leave school, they should leave school with the skills to make good decisions about themselves so they don't harm themselves and they don't harm other people. How do we do it? What might be that curriculum approach, which includes, of course, family life education, but it's more than that. Civic education is education about equality. how do we embed that in our school and in age-appropriate ways? I think we have to me, that would be the real revolution, actually, if we get prevention in the schools.
We will be reinventing a wheel, because I'm sure a lot of other countries have done that. You have lived, you have held.
Karen, it will be a revolution in our country.
Yeah, but I know what I'm saying is that it's not as though you're starting from scratch, because you have models from which you can build that you can adapt to our situation.
Karen, can I read a comment that we had from someone called Speaking Truth to Power? This is the person's name. Yeah. I think it is a crime to be speaking about domestic problems without having full respect in God Almighty order and word for families. Where are the men who should have been part of this healthy topic? I'm going with the last bit. Where are the men who should have been part of this healthy topic?
We wanted to have a man, didn't we? Not try to get a man to come on.
Karen and I will take responsibility. You take full responsibility. We didn't have a man. We're going to have another session where we have some men so we can talk about it.
And since when we need to invite men to talk about domestic violence, that's they should be talking about it on their own. I mean,
no, but we're talking about to educate the public. You know, you can't.
Okay, I understand that, but I'm saying if you feel something is a problem, you talk about it, regardless of whether or not you're invited. And what we are saying that men, yes, have to be much more vocal on this issue. They have to be more reliable allies. This is their cause. This is their cause. So we are saying to men, please speak up, write about it, do your part.
But you see, let me tell you something. I just want to say one thing, that I think we have to be very careful that we, in our advocacy and our passion for an issue, that we come across as though we are unsympathetic to, because we want to solve the problem. At the end of the day, we all want to solve the problem. And in solving the problem, I think we need to hear, whether we agree with it or not, hear a man's perspective, hear a woman's perspective. That's how we will learn and develop as a country.
Karen, who's stopping men from giving their perspective?
I'm
asking you that question. Who's stopping them from giving their perspective?
I'll ask Dennise. Dennise tried.
Well, let me just say something. Fully one third of the applications that are made for protection orders in Trinidad and Tobago are made by men. Now, it may be that when you disaggregate the nature of the applications, it may be that the preponderance of the applications where violence is alleged may be ones coming from women. But the statistics show men very, very, very freely access this remedy.
But they didn't want to very freely come on the show to talk about it.
But they want to,
ladies, what I'm going to do, we have a program on Friday, and it deals with the Family Association. So I'm going to ask Ronald Fields to address this topic. And see
you get some men. Get some men.
Yeah. But there are more men talking about this. That is the truth as well. There are a lot more men who are talking about it, who are involved in it.
I want you to come and talk to the men.
Yeah.
I serious, you know.
I want to share a thought that I have that has come to my mind again from all the things we've talked about. That one of the big issues in our country is that our system structures and processes have failed. And this is what I'm hearing, that we have the law, we know what we're supposed, but implementation is not happening. And I think that is just, it's just reflective of a number of other things in our society. So we need to have leaders who will start to think through, how do we reframe our structures? How do we strengthen our systems? What are the processes that we need to minimize the breaking of the laws and so on? I don't know how people feel.
And in fairness, I just like to be fair. In the office of the Prime Minister, he has an office dealing with gender and child affairs. And I spoke to the officer you are speaking about. It was in relation to an elderly couple. And she went and they got them out. They had these two ladies tied up to a chair, and the neighbors reported it. Anyway, the point what I'm about it, the neighbors reported her, and then they removed them from there. So I think there are a lot of good officers, I think that the Office of the Prime Minister taking on that thing is what we need now is implementation and execution, like so much that is required in our laws. And we need to hear a man's point of view on this, right, Roberta?
Yes, we need to have many, many men talking about this. I fully agree with that.
Okay,
And
I think we reach 6 o'clock.
And Karen, I want to hear more transgender people talking about this as well, because they have rights as well. So as we bring the show to an end, can we just get a little 30-second goodbye from Roberta? Let's just 30-second goodbye.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dennise and Karen, for this. Always good to be anywhere with Lynette. I mean, we all have to use our voices. None of us can be bystanders in this situation. It's all about social justice and equality. We have to be optimistic that we can change our country, and we can. When I say not just our country, the whole world is experiencing the domestic violence. It's not just here. We can change it. Equality and empathy, I think, are the key words.
And Lynette, what is your...
Your mic is
You're
muted.
Mic is muted.
I just wanted to express my appreciation for the opportunity to talk about this issue yet again, and particularly to highlight this most recent development, which is the Todd Lampkin case, and to bring to the fore some of the technical improvements that have been brought to the remedy since 2020, that in large measure, Roberta and I'm not saying only us, many people, but certainly the both of us, in working with the former Attorney General Faris Alwari, bringing about the amendments, and that we still have a lot of work to do in this. We have to now reach out, following this case, seize the opportunity that has been created by this case that has been decided to demonstrate the leadership that we've been attempting to demonstrate all along, with those who are willing to hear us, the powers that be, the police, the executive, to bring about some of the prescriptions that we've been talking about, not only at the level of dealing with the problem after it has occurred, but at the level of, the broader level of prevention.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Lynette and Roberta. And Karen, can I bring this show to a close today?
Yes, you can, Dennise.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Goodbye. See you next Monday for Hard Talk with Karen and Dennise. Goodbye.
Bye-bye, Roberta, Lynette, Dennise.
Over and out.
And David McIntyre.
Yes, thank you so much, Karen, Dennise, Roberta, and Lynette. It's been fantastic information. So that's it for today's edition of Hard Talk. The topic was domestic violence, male and female, with Karen Nunez Tesheira and Dennise Demming, with special guests Lynette and Roberta.